Across Earth's vast timeline, our story stretches back tens of millions of years. It begins deep in the jungle, among our earliest primate ancestors. From there, the path leads forward to modern humans standing atop the world. But we must ask, where did we truly come from? What or who shaped us into something uniquely human? Why was it our kind that mastered fire, forged tools, and built cities? And why do we still look to the stars, searching for our place in the cosmos? This is a journey through time to uncover the hidden origins of our species. 25 million years ago, Earth's climate changed. Seas shrank, mountains rose, and Africa transformed. Lush rainforests stretched north, teeming with life in the sunlit canopy. Here appeared great apes, strong-fingered, agile, swinging with ease on their branches. At times, they stood upright, stepping over trunks to reach the next branch. Perhaps these leaping figures planted the earliest seeds of human walking. In this green ocean, balance and skill meant the difference between life and death. Sharp eyes, agile limbs, the jungle's law shaped the blueprint of humanity. In Africa's heart, rivers wound through rainforest shadows, the stage of our beginnings. Towering giants held the sky. In the canopy lay sunlight, fruit, and safety. Balance, strength, agility. Jungle laws quietly shaped the humans to come. Among branches, they leapt and swung, finding food and shelter with natural skill. They sometimes stood on branches, striding over trunks to see into the distance. Upright walking began as a way past obstacles, the first step in our story. As climate shifted, forests thinned, and vast grasslands spread to the horizon. Leaving the canopy brought a wider view and far greater danger. In the open world, every step demanded vigilance and intelligence. Running on all fours was not just speed, it was survival. Savanna wines brought both new threats and opportunities for evolution. Monsoon rains drummed the canopy, rivers swelled, and the forest breathed anew. Fruiting trees drew life from miles around, color, scent, and constant motion. Insects hummed like wires. Birds stitched the sky between shafts of light. Vines braided the air, turning height into highways above the shadowed floor. Brachiation carried them farther, faster, a dance of reach, grip, and release. A cautious step on a trunk, then another. A brief, deliberate stand. Feet curled to branches, shoulders rolled free, bodies tuned to the trees. A ground crossing by the riverbed, quick, alert, and ready to climb. A juvenile followed, learning balance the only way it's learned, by risk. Grooming bound the group, touch weaving trust where words did not exist. A mother cradled her infant, breath slowed, warmth steady in the green dusk. Play was practice for survival, chasing, feinting, retreating, and trying again. At dusk, they built night nests, careful folds of branches, sleep above danger. At dawn, calls rippled outward, a living net of warnings and replies. A leopard shadow slid below. Silence tightened. Every heartbeat a choice. Storm snapped branches like bones. Caution and memory were carved into survival. On the horizon, wildfire glowed through rain. Heat and fear flickering together. Hands explored bark and fruit. Curiosity, the oldest tool of all. Eyes held the forest's far edge, a question waiting in the grasslands. From treetops to open light. When would upright steps finally leave the branches? 13 million years ago, forests broke into patches. At the edges came Pyrrholopithecus, shoulders built to hang. A careful stand, then a swing. Shoulders did the work. Ground was only a brief crossing. As forests thinned and edges widened, short forays to water and fruit grew more frequent. By dusk, they wove night nests. Longer, deeper sleep likely strengthened memory and learning, leaving the canopy widened of view and the danger. Who would take the first hominin step? Dry season thinned the fruit. To reach the next tree, they crossed more ground. Between islands of trees, routes were chosen. A lookout held a route, while others moved in quick bursts. Claw prints and scent in the mud warned them. The path bent away. After rain, yesterday's tracks remained. A juvenile studied them, learning the way home. Each ground crossing trained body and brain. A world beyond the trees took shape. They moved along shadowed corridors at the forest edge. Roots etched into memory. Brief, upright strides forded a shallow stream. Reflections trembled with each step. A sentinel watched, then traded places. Shared vigilance kept the group safe. Night nests rose higher at the edge. Rest above danger. Eyes on open ground. Drought returned harder each year. Ground forays lengthened. Horizons widened. And risks grew. At midday, heat they hugged the shade, moving along shadows to save water and strength. Tall grass hid the ground. A brief, upright scan cleared the way forward. Short ground, carries grew common, fruit in hand, eyes fixed on the next patch of trees. Burn scars from wildfires opened corridors, faster routes, and exposed risks. Farther from trees meant slower returns. Choices began shaping bodies and habits. They crossed in bursts, scout, signal. Then the band moved in short, upright dashes. Young watched each grip and footfall, rehearsing the switch from ground to tree. At dusk, wind pressed the grass flat. A brief window to cross the widest gap. Brief, upright scans became habitual. A posture born of need, not pride. At the far edge, a new choice gathered. 7 million years approached. The hominin threshold, a fallen giant became a bridge. They crossed the most exposed ground along its trunk. Wind carried scent and direction. Facing the breeze, they sensed danger before it appeared. Fruit in hand, he kept both hands occupied and walked bipedally through mud. Speed with caution, not knuckles. Dusk brought a low growl from the edge. A sentinel called, and the group closed ranks. At dawn, they used the charred corridor again. Farther, faster, each step a wager. Cool morning air quickened the pace. Shadows linked a ground corridor between trees. Another shallow barred the Juveniles clung belly-side as mothers waded across. A shadow crossed the sky. A brief, upright look, then a rout beneath cover. Repeated choices favored bodies handling both trees and ground. Adaptation advanced quietly. Wind came from the open grasslands. 7 million years, and the hominin threshold lay ahead. Ground forays lengthened. Brief, upright scans grew frequent. Habits set by countless choices. Night amplified the open. A distant growl pressed bodies back into shadowed trees. At the boundary, where shadow meets open light, one lineage would commit more steps to the ground. 7 to 4 million years ago, hominins crossed a threshold. There, by ancient lakes, Sahelanthropus, Tumai, took cautious, occasional two-footed steps. Those steps foreshadowed Orrorin in Kenya, its femur built to bear upright weight. As woods broke into patches, brief, upright scans became the way between them. Then, Ardipithecus walked the ground, yet kept a grasping, abducted big toe. With hands freed, they carried fruit for infants, easing short ground crossings. Shared calls and rotating watch kept small bands safer between the trees. Thus, two free hands set the stage. Sharp edges lay millions of years ahead. Under the harsh sun, short, upright strides between shade cut heat and effort. And with broad hips and a steady trunk, they balanced over uneven ground. A grasping big toe kept the trees close. Climb when needed, walk when possible. With hands now free, they gathered and carried. Even an unshaped branch drew fruit close. At the water's edge, they waited upright. Infants clung belly-side, eyes fixed on the far bank. So vigilance rotated. Brief calls pulled the line tight before moving again. With each crossing, posture was rehearsed. Upright steps grew practiced, more natural. And in this mosaic world, their bodies took shape. The road ahead leaned into bipedal life. Tall grass hid the way. An upright scan picked the shaded path. Then, with both hands full of fruit, they stepped back into shade. A fallen trunk bridged the gap. He crossed upright, torso vertical. Facing the wind, scent warned of danger before sight. After rain, muddy prints recorded practice. Step by upright step. At a soft call, infant lifted, hands close. They retreated upright. At the edge, they gathered and shared. Free hands eased exchange. Thus, in this mosaic world, habit settled, scanning, carrying, moving upright. In that maze of shade and shapes, they linked safe paths in mind. And juveniles mirrored the gait, practicing short, upright steps between roots and grass. With heads balanced higher, upright glances lasted longer, sweeping the grass. And freed hands did more, clearing branches, easing the way for others. Toward this span's end, toes drew closer. Each upright step grew steadier. As open gaps lengthened, so did the stretches they walked upright. In the dry season, distant water and fruit meant longer walks, carrying saved trips. Thus, two free hands and steadier steps set the stage. Sharp edges ahead. A glint on river stones drew the eye. Curiosity paused on a natural edge. From that weight in the hand, perception shifted. Texture mapped into the palm. Beside them, a juvenile watched, keeping the gesture and the hint of an edge. The stone stayed. The idea moved on with them. In the evening wind, routes and calls interlocked, safer together. And as years rolled on, those hands and steps were ready. Millions later, a sharp edge would be struck. Late in the dry season, the riverbed lay bare. Vultures circled. The air was scent. They moved in with the wind in their faces. Scent led before sight. A sentinel scanned high. The line tightened, waiting for a moment. Among river stones, a naturally sharp flake was enough. No striking needed. At first, touch of meat. The cut was swift. Take a strip, then go. Hyena shadows closed in, a soft call. Food in hand, back to shade. In cover, a rounded stone cracked small bone. Marrow turned to fuel. Sharing happened in the shade. More energy changed the day, and a distant future. To keep scavengers away, they cached a small piece high in shade. Juveniles learned by watching. Carry with both hands, keep moving, share en route. As the wind shifted, the sentinel rotated. Brief calls moved the line within shade. At water, they did not linger. A rinse, a sip, and on they went. Bones and stones left behind became cues. Next time, path and food came faster. At dusk, quiet under branches, grooming and leaning restored bonds worn by the dead. As night deepened, nests rose higher. Infants slept in arms. Watch rotated. With more energy and steadier strides, their range stretched. The ground began to feel familiar. At first light, they followed a remembered shade line. Extra energy brought a longer day. Under watch, a juvenile cracked a small bone. One strike, pale marrow showed. With chin lifted, wind and circling vultures traced the route. A path left by giants ran faster. On an elephant trail, upright steps quickened. Hyena scent rode the wind. A rounded stone sat ready as they backed away. At noon, they lightly pounded tubers. Fibers parted. Chewing took less effort. First rain fell. Leftovers lifted high as they moved under the drip line. By dusk, they reached a known edge. Cache, share, keep watch. The rules became habit. After rain, soft ground held clear, heel-to-toe prints. A line home. An unshaped branch levered a rotten log. Insects spilled. Protein passed hand to hand. Before the ford, a branch tested depth. Food held high. They crossed upright and quick. In shade, small pieces moved hand to hand. Sharing and travel became the same act. Distant growl advanced. Bodies rose tall. The line closed, and they turned upwind. Fallen trunk was a bridge, heel to toe, like long practice. A juvenile stepped into adult prints. Evening, a forked branch lifted caches higher. Vultures waited farther away. Next day's light washed the grass. The weight of hands and the hint of edges felt familiar. A sharper age drew near. Dry season dawned. They set out carrying rounded stones, not weapons, just spare strength. Curiosity paused in the palm. Edges and textures mapped into memory. A dry riverbed, a rounded stone cracked small bone. Pale marrow became fuel for walking. Cached good stones by a familiar buttress root. Tomorrow, the stones would still be there. The evening wind, routes and calls aligned again. Sharing kept the small band safer. Seasons passed in movement, steadier hands, longer steps. Soon a struck edge would appear. Farther ahead, a waiting glow. About 2.6 million years ago, a sharp flake split from stone. The Oldowan edge began. Edges first worked plants, peeling tubers, cutting fibers and sinew. Division of labor emerged. One cut, another carried. Juveniles learned by watching. Cores and flakes were cached along familiar paths. Tools began to wait for tomorrow. High-energy marrow came from cracking and prying. More calories for longer range. Plans took shape, moved by water and shade. Farther by day, safer by night. Longer legs and steadier strides. Homo erectus stepped onto a wider map. Fire was not sudden. Between about 1 and 400,000 years ago, its use grew steady. A larger core, thin to a teardrop hand axe. Sharper, built to last. The hand axe cut and shaped. A digging stick took form in falling shavings. Rolls settled. One cut, one watched, others carried. Edges grew familiar to the hand. Grip and angle repeated. Cuts grew cleaner. Bank embers at night. Rake them again at dawn. Fire stretched the evening. Sharing, grooming, quiet coordination found time. Longer routes opened. Valleys, coasts, and passes linked outward corridors. Beyond the fire, breath carried more meaning. Language and symbols drew near. At daybreak, they followed the water's edge. Stops and routes mapped in mind. From stone came an edge. A few precise blows. A flake sprang free. Flakes cut plant fibers. Leaf bundles carried food and ember safely. They lifted together. Sharing weight made longer, steadier walks. Fire came from wild flame. A sheltered ember was carried home. Slow embers softened tubers. Less chewing, more gain. By firelight, they shared, groomed, and murmured. The group tightened like a web. More energy, longer range. Fire stitched the night into a road. At dawn, they fed the ember. Thin smoke began the day's route. By midday, a small hearth rose under shade, for cooking and for watch. Tubers turned on coals. The young learned by doing, cooking and sharing. Night closed in. Within the fire circle, rest and watch held together. Along a ridge at dawn, long legs and even strides carried the route farther. At water, hands lifted the ember along a chain. Feet chose the shallow stones. At a new edge, smoke-darkened rock. Flakes and a core hid under roots. Firelight lengthened the day. Gesture and tone wove plan and memory. At dawn, they wrapped the ember and tamped the ash ring. The day stretched forward. Long legs, steady trunks. Along ridges and water lines, they ranged farther. On stone, strike by strike, a thin edge took shape in the palm. Hearths grew tidier, embers steadier. Night found order in watch and rest. By the fire, the young copied the motions. Feed the flames, let them breathe. Beyond the firelight, voice and symbol would carry us farther still. 300,000 years ago in Africa, the first Homo sapiens emerged. Lighter frames, deft hands, and endurance on the move became their tools. Fire was familiar, camps grew orderly, and nights stretched with stories. Ochre stained fingertips, marks spread across flakes and shells. Beads and pierced shells announced group and identity. Speech grew precise. Breath and tone now carried plans. Long-range exchange began. Stone and pigment moved along remembered paths. Skins and simple rafts tested the winds of river mouths and bays. Journeys out of Africa opened. Coasts and savannas stretched into roads. In Eurasian valleys, we met Neanderthals and Denisovans. Not only competition, interbreeding left greetings in our genes. Burials with flowers placed farewells into memory. Between scattered fires, a bone flute breathed the first melodies. On cave walls, handprints ran with deer. Imagination turned to image. Warmer coverings and sharper blades met ice winds and highlands. Dogs joined us. Nights went farther. Warnings came sooner. Hooks and net shadows touched tides. The sea fed new energy. Ice waned and waters rose. Routes shifted with the seasons. Names were repeated. Around fires, myth took shape. 12,000 years ago, grains grew heavy in our palms. Sowing and irrigation linked fires into villages. Dogs, sheep, and cattle entered pens. Domestication rewrote destinies. Pottery and cloth stored seasons. Food bridged the lean times. Villages rose to city-states. Roads and walls marked borders. Writing appeared. Law and debt pressed into clay. Bronze rang. Caravans set the continent's tempo. Skies met calendars, and seafaring pulled horizons close. Religions and empires spread. Languages braided together. Knowledge sped up. Paper and print sent thought traveling. Science lit method. Experiments made the world repeatable. Steam and electricity drove steel. Cities climbed skyward. Rails, steamships, and telegraph shrank the planet to a conversation. Images and radio carried memory. Voices crossed oceans. Human footsteps reached the moon. The blue earth hung behind. Satellites and networks laid new meridians. Information flowed like rivers. Prosperity brought costs. Climate, species, and coasts are changing. From standing upright to looking up, we learn to repair and restrain. Beyond the starlight, The road continues. Where it leads is ours to choose.